The biggest misconception out there when it comes to fat loss, or actually the food choices for fat loss, especially when it comes to your meat protein sources, is that so many people believe that they have to stick to eating chicken breasts if fat loss is the goal. Now, it's not only chicken breasts that people believe they have to eat if fat loss is the goal. Oftentimes you might add in rotation some tuna, and if you're feeling adventurous, maybe some lean ground beef. But other than that, a lot of people aren't sure what meat protein sources they can eat if fat loss is the goal. So in this video, I'm going to touch on meat protein sources that you can incorporate into your nutritional plan if fat loss is your goal. And by the end of this video, you will realize that your rotation of meat protein sources can be a lot more than chicken breast, tuna, or lean beef mince. The lean meat sources that I mentioned within this video already, which are your chicken breast, your tuna, and your lean ground beef. The reason why they get such a good name in the fat loss industry, and the reason why they're often labeled as the best meats for fat loss, is because they are a lean meat source. And what that essentially means is those meat sources that I mentioned contain a lot less fat than other meat sources out there. And when a food source or a meat source contains less fat, automatically it contains less calories. So what does that mean for fat loss? That means that if you are eating a leaner source of meat, a leaner source of protein, ultimately at the end of the day, you are going to be consuming less calories because there's less fat on that meat source. So let's take a chicken breast, for example, and a lamb chop, for example. In 100 grams of chicken breast, there are around 175 calories. And in 100 grams of lamb chops, there are around 300 calories. So if we compare the exact amount of volume, 100 grams for 100 grams of the two different protein sources, you will see that the chicken breast contains less calories per 100 grams than what the lamb chop does. So what does that mean for fat loss? Well, it could mean two things. Number one, if you are eating chicken breast, you could eat more volume, so more food. You could eat more food, more volume, which will keep you fuller for longer, which will help with adherence to your calorie goals. Whereas if you're eating something fattier like a lamb chop, for example, the volume of your food will be less, which ultimately means that you're eating less food at the end of the day. And this is often where people get confused. Less food doesn't mean less calories. Or if we flip it, more food, like having the chicken breast, for example, doesn't necessarily mean more calories. Or number two, you could have the same volume of food, say 100 grams of chicken, as opposed to having the 100 grams of lamb chop, and your calorie consumption will be less, which ultimately, again, at the end of the day, places you in a greater chance of being within a calorie deficit. And again, a calorie deficit is what you want to create if fat loss is the goal. And this is exactly why things like a chicken breast, things like tuna, things like lean beef mince get labeled as the best foods for fat loss or the best meats or proteins for fat loss. But all it really is that they contain less fat, which means that they contain less calories, which means number one, you can either eat more food on the same amount of calories, or if you're not that hungry, just choosing leaner meats can help reduce your overall calorie consumption throughout the day. And another example would be your ground beef or your mince. You always have the option of going for the leaner ground beef or the regular ground beef. And again, most people believe that they have to go for the leaner ground beef if fat loss is the goal, which is not necessarily the case. It's just that the lean ground beef comes in at a lower calorie rate because there is a reduced amount of fat. Whereas your regular ground beef comes in at a higher amount of calories, which means either you're going to be eating more calories or you're going to be eating a little bit less food throughout the day. But having something fattier or having something higher in fats, no matter what the food source is, it's not that it's going to be detrimental to your fat loss. It just means that it carries a little bit more calories than something that is lower in fat or no fat. Your fats as a macronutrient contain 9 calories per gram, whereas your carbohydrates and your proteins carry 4 calories per gram. So you can see there's quite a big difference within the calorie profile when it comes to your fats as a macronutrient. So again, there's no need to be scared of anything that is higher in fat. The only thing that I would suggest is make sure that you're aware of the nutritional value or the calorie value of the certain foods that you are eating.